Hello, old folks. We got a crazy bear attack. Before we get into the video, make sure you please like it and leave a comment right now. Let me know if you like the channel and if you like this style, reaction. Me reacting to other videos about bears. Because I know y'all like bears so much. Let's get right into it though.
Our story today takes place in Yellowstone National Park, but we will go back in time to the year 1912, where the way of life in the park was starkly different to that of today's life. With constant fluctuations in the wildlife population, 40% of the lakes in the park were barren of fish, creating widespread problems for the people in the area, but also for the wildlife, which began to starve. Eventually, something had to be done, as the people became desperate, and so there was a two-story fish hatchery built in 1912, which helped to replenish the area again. In turn, this increased the local population of bears, as they were now able to find food more readily available. As a result, many populations had a sudden increase, namely the grizzly bear numbers, which was not too much of a problem as there weren't too many people in the area, and encounters were still very unlikely. That is, until a bear known as Two Toes became a man-eater and changed the locals' perspective on bears forever. In May 1912, Johnny Graham decided to visit Crevice Mountain with his favorite horse in the hope of striking gold and finally making a family fortune. Suddenly, his horse tripped in a creek and fell onto her side. Johnny realized that she was struggling to return to her feet and tried to pull her up with her reins with little success. She was able to pull herself from the creek to the bankside, but she had broken her leg and so would not be capable of continuing with the hike. He decided it would be better to put her out of her misery instead of leaving her to die, and so with his hunting rifle, he shot her through the head. He took one last look at his steed, gathered up his things, and returned to his cabin for the night, trying to decide what his next move would be without his horse. After a few days of prospecting the area on foot, he returned to his cabin to see the dead body of his horse being slowly devoured by a giant grizzly bear. He watched the animal through the willow trees, trying to determine its condition and how much a threat it would likely pose to him. As he watched the animal, he noticed that he was a very healthy male bear and knew that he wouldn't have much of a chance if it decided to attack. So instead, decided he would set a trap for the animal. The heavy steel trap was designed with thick, jagged teeth, perfect to clamp onto the animal's leg and hold him in place until Johnny could return and shoot him. It was not the most humane device and would certainly cause the animal incredible distress. But this was not a concern of the prospector. Once the bear was full and sauntered away from the corpse, Johnny placed a 60-pound bear trap nearby in the hopes of trapping the animal in the coming days. This would not go according to plan. He returned the next day to check if the bear had been caught or not, but to his bewilderment, the trap was gone. He didn't understand how this was possible and came up with 3 possible scenarios. 1, there was another person out in the wilderness who had stolen his device, although this was highly unlikely as he hadn't seen anyone in days. 2, the bear had gotten caught in the device and pulled himself free in the bushes, although he couldn't see any blood anywhere. Or 3, the bear still had the device attached to him and was wandering around in extreme pain. Johnny surveyed the area and found footprints of the bear leading into the forest. He followed them and suddenly found the animal trapped between 2 trees, with the trap creating a wedge that he couldn't escape from. Johnny was overjoyed as he could tell the animal was trapped and wouldn't be able to get him. He slowly lined up his rifle with the bear's chest as the target. He fired 2 shots into the animal's ribs, and with a loud roar, the bear fell to the floor and ceased to move. Confident that his shots had killed him, Johnny strode towards the animal and laid his rifle against a nearby tree, ready to begin skinning the body for a rug in his cabin. As he stood in front of the body, the bear suddenly sprang to life and pounced at the man, and before he could even process what was happening, the bear was ripping him to pieces. Through its agony, the animal had one last bout of adrenaline and decided to use it against his killer in a final act of revenge. He pulled his leg through the trap, ripping off 3 of his toes in the process, but he didn't care. Once free from the trap, he started tearing into Johnny's abdomen and forced him into the ground as he screamed for help, cursing his decision to leave the rifle behind. The bear soon decided to flee after his mauling, leaving Johnny bleeding out but alive. He knew he had to quickly move and find immediate help, or else he would die from his injuries, or worse, the bear would return to finish the job. After some time, a fellow miner happened upon him whilst on a trail and ran to find help. A group of miners and lumberjacks quickly arrived in the park and tried to hunt down the animal, but to no avail. They were unable to follow the two-toed bear after he crossed a fast river and knew the bear would almost certainly attack any human being it came across after its run-in with Johnny. Instead of crossing the river and finishing off the bear, they decided to return to Johnny and take him to get medical help. But when they returned, he had already died of his injuries. Johnny Graham may have been the first victim of this bear, but he would not be the last. A year later, a 61-year-old woodsman named Pat Welsh was sleeping in the area when he was suddenly awoken by scuffling sounds within his camp. He had been camping for decades and knew exactly what would be making those sounds: a bear. He realized that he was being ransacked by the animal as it raided his supplies and devoured the ham and bacon that he found within the camp. Quickly, Pat grabbed cooking utensils, pots, pans, anything he could make noise with, and began to crash them together in the hopes of scaring the animal away. This usually did the trick, but this bear was not afraid of the noise, and instead began to walk towards Pat, who realized that he was in danger. He grabbed his wood-chopping axe and began to swing it at the animal, hoping that it would see Pat as a threat, or, at the very least, too much effort to kill, and just leave. Unfortunately, the bear was unfazed and simply batted the axe out of his hands, leaving him vulnerable, just as the bear wanted. Knowing that his prey was now defenseless, the bear began his fatal attack and ripped Pat to pieces, clawing him across his whole body as he screamed for help. His friend grabbed some candles and charged at the bear, using the fire to scare the bear away so he could save his friend. But it was too late. The bear had mauled him so severely that he could barely recognize his friend. He was able to drag Pat back to camp and tried to get help, but there was no point. His injuries were too severe, and he died just a few days later. When reporting his death, Pat's friend confirmed to authorities that the bear had only 2 toes, making Pat his second confirmed kill. 3 years later, in June 1922, an outlaw known as Frenchie was setting traps along the creek to catch anything he could and sell it back in town. Trapping was illegal without a license, but this didn't matter too much to Frenchie. He was already on the run for various different crimes in different states at the time. One day he realized that his trap line had caught something big, but he had to return home in order to kill it. He saw the animal from afar, a giant grizzly bear struggling in the creek. Frenchie ran back to his cabin and grabbed his hunting rifle. He returned at nightfall, but he couldn't see the bear. Somehow, he had escaped from the man's trap and was now roaming loose. His location was not a mystery for long, as he was swiftly attacked by the same bear that he had trapped. But this time, he would not win. Frenchie's rifle was found nearby a few days later as his wife sent out for help in finding her husband. His body was never found, but from his rifle, his death was assumed to be brutal. It is thought that the bear was able to swat the rifle from the man's hands as he pulled the trigger, allowing the bear to overpower him easily and finish the job. They believed this due to his rifle being bent, as if something heavy had struck it. 2 Toes was never seen or heard from again, although the trap in which he was caught in was found a year later. Ultimately, 2 Toes was never seen from again after finishing his rampage with a confirmed kill count of 3 men, although it was speculated to have a body count much higher. There was multiple missing persons in Yellowstone during the time who were also believed to be the victim of 2 Toes, but without any bodies being found, it can never be confirmed. In the years that followed, the legend of the deadly Two-Toes continued to haunt the local prospectors and trappers. Every brave soul who dared step into the wilderness couldn't help but feel a shiver down their spine, frightened with the anticipation that they might soon come face to face with the murderous bear and meet their terrifying final affliction.
Nice story. The boy Two-Toes, whatever his name is out there, slaughtered him. Let me know how y'all feel about that in the comments.